What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel once again. If you come across this channel and you haven't subscribed, just subscribe, like, and also comment. And I would like also to appreciate and my credit goes to the original creators of this video. Today I would like to talk about this leader who is bold. She speaks without fear. She speaks with confidence. And let us watch this clip as this leader speaks. She is from Jamaica. She is a leader that speaks truth, speaks confidence to the people. So guys, let us watch this clip, and at the end, then I'll come up with more reaction.
Where Barbados, Jamaica, Grenada and Dominica took action to ban South African goods in solidarity with the people of South Africa. Recognizing that though they were thousands of miles away, there was an injustice being perpetrated, man's inhumanity to man, that required people who had little power to take a stand and to say, wrong is wrong. And their efforts were soon followed months later in April of 1960 in our sister island in Trinidad and Tobago, where the dock workers of Trinidad refused to take the cargo from South Africa off the ships in April of 1960, and refused to refuel the ship that had brought the cargo, recognizing that even though they were dock workers and not capable of great and grave decisions, they could do what they could within the space that they could. And their work was to be followed then, of course, by that titan of Caribbean revolution and social reform, Fidel Castro, El Comandante, who worked then with that other great Caribbean titan, Michael Manley of Jamaica, well known perhaps to many of you. And of course our own father of independence, Errol Walton Barrow, who worked with Fidel Castro in the struggle for the liberation of the peoples of Southern Africa by allowing the planes that left Havana, Cuba, to refuel in Bridgetown, Barbados, in order to bring the troops into Southern Africa, and in particular Southwestern Africa. And then, of course, there was the decision of the Commonwealth heads of government. And I remember as a young law student in London, caught up in the fervor of the anti-apartheid movement, and caught up in the passion of wanting to see your own imagery on television, because in those days you just didn't. And when we saw the students of South Africa week after week rise up to take their future into their own hands, it placed the pressure on leaders like Margaret Thatcher and others, such that by the time the Commonwealth heads of government meeting went to Nassau, Bahamas, a determination was made to establish the Eminent Persons Group. And in that Eminent Persons Group, co-chaired by Malcolm Fraser of Australia and Chief Obasanjo of Nigeria, it also included a woman who was to become the first Governor General of Barbados, Dame Nita Barrow, who came here as one of the 7 persons to determine whether there could be a platform for talks and for release, in order to ensure that the ungodly and unconscionable actions of apartheid could be brought to an end. Regrettably, Their work was to be stymied by the then government, but they were capable and able at the time to meet Madiba. And it is instructive what they wrote in their unanimous report about Madiba in 1986, and I quote, "Having visited him on 3 occasions, what was their assessment? That he impressed us as an outstandingly able and sincere person whose quality of leadership were self-evident. We found him unmarked by any trace of bitterness, despite his long imprisonment. His overriding concern was for the welfare of all races in South Africa in a just society. He longed to be allowed to contribute to the process of reconciliation." This was not post-release. This was not on the eve of release. This was still deep in the bowels of his imprisonment. And you know, I've deliberately decided to take a segue this afternoon before addressing the fundamental issues, because it is important that we contextualize the struggle and the values for those who refuse to be reminded, or who fail to be reminded, or who are not reminded, may well believe that this was as easy as dealing with the twinkle of an eye with the remediation and reparation of an awful thing. It hurt me to hear that there are some who believe that Madiba did not do enough, and perhaps worse for a few, that he might have been a sellout. All because what they believe, justifiably so, should be theirs today is not yet theirs. I've deliberately started this conversation this evening by carrying you back to the 1950s and stopping in the 1980s and stopping again in the 1990s. Because if there is any one single truth, it is that each of us runs our leg of the relay. And the baton is all that can be required of us to carry. And yesterday I had the distinct honor of going to the Foundation's headquarters in the Center of Memory, and of reading, and I feel so privileged to be given copies of the transcript in Madiba's own handwriting, and I shall treasure them as long as I have breath. But in reading his own assessment of where he was and what he believed had happened, in what was to become the beginning of chapter 1 of the presidential years, it was ironic that he started with the words, "Men and women all over the world, right down the centuries, come and go." Men and women all over the world, right down the centuries, come and go. What is more significant for me is that as he ended that first chapter, he also reflected on the fact that he sought at no stage for the fame that was to follow him. and that the notion that he could be regarded as a saint was one that he thoroughly rejected. And the last words, I never was one even on the basis of an earthly definition of a saint as a sinner who keeps trying. My friends, we need to pause sometimes and to remember context always. And I do so because in a very real sense, that which I've come to address you today on too is the subject of a great struggle, and will be the subject of a struggle that will require many different people to run their different legs of the baton, of the race, to hand over the baton. And the example of Madiba is the example more than any other that I would want us to hold on to, because in so doing, it is the values that he exhibited, the moral example, the moral compass that he provides, that gives us both the strength and the capacity to run this race, which will be the greatest race that humanity will require of any generation. It stands out for me that at the very outset, courage was never lacking. It is a cause for which I am prepared to fight, but a cause for which I am prepared to die. How many of us can say that today? It was the moral fortitude of a man that determined that no type of offer with special conditionalities for early freedom would be acceptable, because what was required was justice. It is amazing that in the face of the gravest and greatest inhumanity, not just to himself, to his family, to his people, that the vengeance that would otherwise eat and force others into action was absent from his mind, body, and spirit. And as I just read to you from the evidence of the Eminent Persons Group, not conveniently so as an act of politics, but as an act of character, deep in the bosom of his imprisonment. And then there's the story that was told to me yesterday by Cello, as we looked at the photographs of what his cell contained. And I well recall my own visit to Robben Island 20 years ago. And all who, like me, have practiced a little criminal law in my career know that that is a common sight in colonial constructed prisons that had no sanitary facilities. And the humility of the man captured best in being able to ensure that when one of his own brothers was unable to take care of themselves in the most basic and human of ways, that Madiba performed the duties of cleaning for him. An example of servant leadership, if ever there is one. So forgive me if I have strayed a bit, because I believe that in this world where everything is instantaneous and quick, and where people expect results like that, we sometimes need to remind ourselves of the context of the struggles that we fight, and to remind ourselves of what truly was at stake. There's some young people who would simply now, 3 decades after his release, will only know of Nelson Mandela in the context of a history book or in the stories told by others, but would not appreciate what it is to be prevented from being able to love who you want, to work where you want, to live where you want, to do what you want, in ways that are simply not capable of contemplation today. But we can't talk about economic justice and economic opportunity if the basic aspects of freedom have not been guaranteed. No one expects us to be stuck in a moment of time, but it is the understanding that he did what was his to do. It is now up to us to do what is ours to do. And it is for that reason I've come to KwaZulu-Natal. You know, we live in a world that is at a very strange moment in time. It's been described recently as a polycrisis, and it has been so described because as soon as you get accustomed to managing one crisis, you've been hit with another one and another one and another one. And that is what it has felt like in the last few years. This country already knows what it is to lose people to the ravages of a public health crisis as you did with HIV and AIDS for so long. Then to have to face, like the rest of us, the awful pandemic of COVID-19, taking away so many. All of us know people who have died in the last few years. None of us dreamt of a moment when our movement would be restricted such that we couldn't do the things that we wanted to do. And this was not being imposed on us by authoritarian governments. This was being imposed by public health specialists for the safety and survival of all of us. And as if that were not enough, because we were already fighting the climate crisis, we were still recovering from the financial crisis of 2008-9. As if all of that was not enough, then comes the awful scourge of the cancer of inflation, the cancer of the cost of living. And believe you me, it is a cancer, because you keep trying to run after it and run after it, but you can't catch up with it in that way. And we have now to come to understand that as much as we needed to mobilize to fight against vaccine inequity, that we were not a one-issue country or a one-issue people, that we literally had to fight these multiple crises, because as all of this is happening, people were still dying from the climate crisis. I don't talk about the climate change. Change happened a long time ago. Crisis is where we are, and crisis is what we have to fight. And today, I want us to recognize that what is required of us is going to have to allow us to, one, develop partnerships in places where we may never have dreamt of so doing before, and to be able to do things in new ways that we had never thought of doing, and that the actions required are not simply those of others, but of us, because it is the collective action that has led the world to be where it is today. There is no doubt that those primarily responsible for the increase in greenhouse gas emissions are the G20 countries, for whom 80% of the responsibility is there. Within that context, the traditional colonial powers who benefited from the Industrial Revolution through our blood, our sweat, and our tears, have been the ones who have effectively put the world in this position of warming. Theirs is the stock of gases. But then there are those who continue today, for which there are many of us. No name, no blame, because it's all of us. And it is the combined effect of the stock primarily, but yes, the flow today that continues to cause the problems. I want us to reflect on the principles of justice and solidarity.
Hello guys, welcome once again to the channel. I hope you have watched the full clip and you have seen how Mia Mottle, the Prime Minister of Barbados, is expressing herself, the love and how to work for the people. So guys, I would like to say that most African leaders, they are puppets. Working for people is something that most of them lack. But this lady, Mia Mottle, does crazy things, and that is why most people in Barbados and love this lady. She's a good lady. So I could have seen Mia Mottle is one of the leaders, is the Prime Minister of Barbados, and she is also the leader of corrections, and she is doing well. When you look at the track record of this leader, you'll find that most of the activities she is performing, she has done many things that other leaders need to copy from this leader, Mia Mottle. And most of people across the world, when you talk about Mia Mottle, they will show that the lady in Jamaica. And that is why I would like to break some of the things that as African leaders embrace our gratitude, so that we can also learn from this Mia Mottle, because she is performing, she's not under. And her track record, you will find that most parts of Caribbean, Barbados is a leading, one of the leading region that are in development, and this is due to this Mia Mottle, who is the Prime Minister. When you see these are some of the clips that she was talking in some summit in Africa, and this is she was in South Africa, and she was urging African leaders not to be puppets, to African leaders to work for the people. She was embracing that loyalty because if we work for the people, the development for the people will gain something good unto your name. And as we have seen, she keep insisting, just work for the people, just to do things that are good for the people. And when you see this Mia Mottle, she loves Africa because most of the times she comes to Africa to defend the people of Africans. You want them to copy, you want them to work for the people, not to fear the Western culture. That is why she embraces that, we normally say, that spirit to most of African people, African leaders, so that they can also be able to work for the people. And when you go in Papa Talks, you'll find many things that this lady has done. You'll find many of the activities she has done, many things, and she has achieved. And she wants that spirit to move to African leaders so that they can also cope up. And when you hear her boldness, how she speaks, she gives that courage to African leaders so that if they embrace that, they will not fear. They will be able to speak in their minds out to people, so that other people, not to fear the Western culture, not to fear those colonizers, to be able to learn so that they can also be able to make their regions develop. So guys, these are some of the few reactions that I have for Mia Mottle, but I know that many of you have many reactions. I urge that just drop your comment in the conversations, and if you come across this channel and you haven't subscribed, just subscribe to this channel. Thank you guys. Let us meet to the another video.